الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. First, a really brief introduction about Mukhtasar al-Quduri, if you haven't read it yet. That the word Mukhtasar, whenever used in fiqh, refers to a concise book which gathers only the important masail which are agreed upon and which are to be acted on. It doesn't discuss the adillah on how the ahkam are derived. It doesn't talk about the hadith and the Quran behind it. Sometimes they do, but their focus is mainly on that. They don't mention all of the opinions that scholars may have in this masala. And usually they only choose those masail which are muftabihi or on which fatwa is given, which are practiced. So it's a very basic text to fiqh. And the specialty about this book in particular, Mukhtasar al-Quduri, is that it's one of the most makhdum books in al-fiqh al-Hanafi. I mean, it has been given most service in, I guess, Hanafi fiqh. Many of the later works is based on this book, either in forms of commentaries on this book or building on the masail mentioned in this book, summarizing the book, mentioning the mawazul ikhtilaf where the differences have occurred in actually stipulating what the fatwa might be within some of the opinions mentioned in the book, and so on and so forth. So having the most service done to this book, it holds a special place within Hanafi fiqh itself. And so this is usually the first book that a student who takes on a full journey of knowledge goes through. And it starts off with Kitab al-Taharah. The word kitab, you'll see it mentioned at the beginning of every chapter. The word kitab actually refers to a group of laws and a group of rulings. Uh, it can be specific to something and it doesn't have to be specific. It can be a more general category. So Kitab al-Tahara includes a lot of different things about purification, its methods, about what to purify, when to purify, how to purify, and the purification of your body, your clothes, and the place of worship, and so on. So it has a lot of different things, a lot of different masail, which are related to tahara in general. So a bunch of masail, when grouped together, are known as a kitab. You'll see in other word later on, it's known as fasal. Fasal is also almost similar to kitab. It is like a group of different laws and rulings. But the difference is a kitab is general. It can have specified masail, it can have more open masail. There is no special grouping involved. But fasal is a very specific grouping. So when I say faslun fil wuzu, that this is a chapter in wuzu, you can basically say that all the masail that are going to come next are being related to wuzu and not anything else. So Kitab is basically a book and Fasl are the chapters of that book. So this book, Mukhtasar Quduri, in itself has more than 15 chapters, or more than 15 books. And each book has its own set of chapters. So that's the basic differentiation between Kitab and Fasl. And these two words are going to come in this book a lot. So you need to know that. Second, the word Tahara. The word Tahara literally means to purify and can mean to purify anything. It can be used to purify the soul, and from it, the word Taharatun Nafs. It can also be mean to purify the body. It can take the form of wuzu. It can take the form of ghusl. It can mean to purify your clothes. وَثِيَابَكَ فَطَهِّرْ. In Surah Al-Mudaththir, it's mentioned that your clothes, so purify them. The word tahir from tahara is used. And so all types of purification literally are included in the word of tahara. But when we talk about tahara in fiqh, we usually refer to taharatul mahal anil najasa al-haqiqiyya wal-aqliyya. That getting rid of filth, whether it's a tangible form or it's intangible, which we will talk about later. And so to purify that specific area. And so we already know we didn't talk about the soul in fiqh. We talk about the rulings related to our bodies or rulings that relate to this world. And so taharatul qalb or taharatul nafs, that's the domain of tasawwuf, that's the domain of ihsan. So when talking about tahara, tahara refers to the cleaning and the purification of the body, the place of worship, and the person's clothes. قال الله تعالى بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إذا قمتم إلى الصلاة فاغسلوا وجوهكم وأيديكم إلى المرافق وامسحوا برؤوسكم وأرجلكم إلى الكعبين. Allah the Exalted, He says that those who believe, when you get up for Salah, wash your faces and your hands up to your elbows. وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ and wipe over your heads. وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ and wash your feet to the ankles. He starts the book off with a verse from the Quran for the sake of tabarruk. ففرض الطهارة غسل الأعضاء الثلاثة ومسح الرأس والمرفقان. فرض الطهارة, the obligations of wuzu, or the things that are necessary that a person does. Without them, wuzu is incomplete. غسل الأعضاء الثلاث, a washing of the three body parts, that is your face, both your hands, and both your feet. When you count them, there are basically five, but the feet are considered as one, and both hands are considered as one body part. So that basically makes them three. So washing of your three body parts, وَمَسْحُ الرَّأْسِ, and the wiping of your head. So these are the four farais of ghusl, of tahara. And by tahara here he means actually wuzu, the minor ritual purification. So as we mentioned, tahara can also be used for ghusl as well, which is taking a bath. But that's not meant over here. What he means is wuzu. So the farais of wuzu are basically four things. Washing of three body parts, the face, the hands, and the feet, and wiping of one body part, which is the head. Now, the word ghusl, which we're saying means to wash, like, what does washing actually mean? So, linguistically, to wash something or ghusl means to pour water over something, right? It doesn't talk about whether the water uh, flowed over a surface, whether drops of it, whether it dropped or it didn't. These things aren't discussed when talking linguistically. But when we talk about it in Shara, uh, the word ghasl refers to al-isala, to actually have the water flow over a surface in such a sense that the end of it, the water actually drops from your limbs. So when you're washing your hand, you have to make sure that the water flows over your entire hand and then it drops from the elbows or from the side of your arms. So if it's in a really minute amount that either doesn't cover your entire hand or that it just basically touches the surface of your hand and doesn't drop off, then this won't be considered as washing your body parts. And so that's why if a person uses wet tissues to wet their body parts, this does not constitute as a wuzu. So you can't use wet tissues to make wuzu? Because the farz of ghusl, the obligation of ghusl, is incomplete. Mash, wiping, linguistically means to basically wipe over anything. Move your hand over any surface, whether it's dry or whether it's wet. But when talking about mash in wudu, we refer to wiping a wet hand over your head. So if it's not wet, your mash is incomplete. You can't wipe a dry hand over it. Then he mentions والمرفقان والكعبان تدخلان في فرض الغسل عند علمائنا الثلاث خلافا للزفر. Then when we talk about washing the hands, the mirfaqan, the elbows are included. And when we talk about the feet, the ankles are included. And this is in the opinion of our three ulama, contrary to the opinion of Zufar, rahimahullah. Now you need to understand four people when talking about fiqh al-Hanafi. Obviously, first of all, there's Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, who's the ustad, the teacher. Then he had three famous, actually had a lot of famous students, but three of them are more famous than the others. The first is Imam Abu Yusuf, rahmahullah. The second Imam Muhammad, and the third Imam Zufar. Although Imam Zufar in seniority was above Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, but because he passed away fairly early after the demise of Imam Abu Hanifa, he didn't become that famous, and his opinions were not as well documented as the others. So when we say ulama thalas, our three ulama, we usually refer to Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Abu Yusuf, and Imam Muhammad. When we say Shaykhain, we mean Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Abu Yusuf. And when we say Sahibain, we mean Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, basically. And when we say Tarafain, we refer to Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Muhammad. So sometimes you'll see in the book, or I'll mention that this is the opinion of the Shaykhain. Whenever I say that, it means that this is the opinion of Imamain Abu Hanifa or Abu Yusuf. And when I say that this is the opinion of the Sahibain, it means I'm referring to Abu Yusuf and Muhammad, rahmahullah. And when I say this is the opinion of the Tarafain, I mean this is the opinion of Abu Hanifa and Muhammad, rahmahullah. So these are some terms that are used relatively quite a lot, actually. And so you should be aware of them. Now, again, back to the masala at hand. Whether elbows or ankles are included in the process of wuzu or they're not. So according to ulama'una thalath, they are. But according to Imam Zufar rahimahullah, these two things aren't included when washing your hands and your feet. The fatwa is on the opinion of the three ulama. Now, when washing your hands and your feet, although the maximum is the elbows and the knees, a person should try and extend a little more. Like when you've covered your forearm and you've covered your elbow, you should actually wash a bit of your arm as well, the muscle above the elbow as well. And similarly, when you're washing your feet, you should not just suffice with washing your ankles, you should wash it at least up to the fibula, like the muscle that is above the ankle. The reason behind this, that in the hadith of the Prophet Islam, he mentions, "Man arada an yutilla ghurratahu yawm al-qiyamah, fal yutil al-wuzu," that whoever of you wishes to increase the brightness or the shine of his body parts in the day of judgment should actually increase in his wuzu. And the muhaddithin, when explaining this hadith, they mean that you should actually extend the maximum limit prescribed in the wuzu and wash some part of your hands and your feet above it. So you should include some of your arm, some part of your arm, and some part of Harun Nasiya. And the obligatory amount when wiping your head is the extent of the forelock, I mean quarter of a head. And this is based on the narration of Mughira ibn Shu'bah radiallahu anhu, أن النبي عليه السلام أتى سباتة قوم, that the Prophet Islam, he arrived at the camp of a tribe. Subata is a place where people throw their garbage. So the Prophet went to that place. فبال وتوضأ, he passed water and then performed wuzu. ومسى على ناصيته وخفيه, and then he wiped over his forelock and his khuf. So the minimum amount is the forelock. Basically, the size of your forehead, which would constitute as 3 fingers, your index finger, middle finger, and your ring finger. So this is the minimum amount that needs you to wipe your head. You can wipe it from any part of your head, whether it's the front, the back, or the sides. But remember, if you have long hair, wiping the hair that is below the ear, that won't count as wiping over the head. You can wipe the hair above your head, but anything below the hair, below the ear, they don't count. And as far as the face is concerned, so the tahdid of the wajh is from the start of the hair on your forehead till the bottom of your chin, and the chin is included, and from one earlobe to the other earlobe. So this entire area, when washing your face, should be covered, because if anything is left out, then your wuzu won't be complete. So again, the boundary of the face is from the hair of your forehead, from where it starts growing, till the bottom of your chin. The chin is also included, from one earlobe to another earlobe. So you have to wash all of this, and the hands included. So now we know the things that we need to wash and what we need to wipe over. One masala to discuss over here are prosthetics. So imagine someone, they've lost a limb, a hand or a feet, and they have prosthetics to support them. So the question is washing the prosthetics necessary? I mean, do they substitute as a person's original limb, or is it exempted from the hukum of the wuzu? So there are two kinds of prosthetics. One's a removable one, and the other is like a fixed. Through surgery, they actually fix that prosthetic with your body, and you can't remove it normally. So anything which becomes a part of your body, I mean, in a literal sense that it's now attached to it and you have no other options, then such things are considered as being the limbs of your body, which means they too have to be washed. But if it's removable, then in that case, that prosthetic is not considered as a part of your body. And so if a person doesn't have a limb, they don't have to wash that. Because obviously the mahall al-wuzu, the thing which must be included in the wuzu, no longer exists. It goes for both the hands and the feet. The other masala is when talking about the mass of the hair, when wiping over your hair. So if someone wears wigs, or they have had an hair transplant, so are the wigs like a substitute for their hair, and is the transplant a substitute, or do you have to remove them or make sure that the skin beneath that artificial hair must be white. As far as hair transplants are concerned, then the other question is whether having a hair transplant or wearing wigs is permissible in the first place. So to talk about the permissibility of these things first, as far as hair transplants are concerned, if you've removed hair from one part of your body to another, say let's say from your maybe feet to your head, then that's okay because they're your own hair, they'll be considered as part of your body, and this is permissible to have such a hair transplant. And wiping over them, it will be the same as wiping over the original hair of your head, and your muss will be complete. Uh, Hair transplant from an other human being is impermissible, so you can't use an other human beings, whether they're dead or alive. You can't use their hair on your body. And not for just hair transplant, a human being's body parts, for the sake of beautification, cannot be used whatsoever. As far as for medical purposes are concerned, like an organ transplant, that's another debate altogether in which ulama have differed. But as far as for beautification purposes are concerned, for example, like increasing the length of your hair or getting rid of baldness or something like that, that's not permissible. As far as wigs are concerned, again, wigs made out of human hair, that's impermissible. Similarly, wigs made out of pig hair are impermissible. But if they're wigs made out of goat hair, sheep wool, or they're synthetic fibers. In this case, if it's a removable wig, it's basically just like a cap, and you can't do muss over a cap, you have to remove it. So you're going to have to remove that wig as well, right? But if this wig is like permanent, there's a procedure in which they actually uh, fix the wig on your head in which you can't remove it, then this becomes like your normal body here. And so if you do muss on it, it will be acceptable and your wuzu will be complete. You don't have to rip it off or anything. So we talked about the prosthetics. We talked about uh, wigs and hair transplants. So again, mentioning about the wigs, they should not be from an impure animal like pigs, and neither should human hair be used as a wig. Other than that, if it's from a halal animal or if it's artificial fiber, synthetic fiber, then you can wear wigs from made out of that material. Now, one thing that I mentioned is that you should wash over in your entire face and your hands without even a single centimeter of these body parts being left dry. Because if they're left dry, then your wuzu is incomplete. From there, we come on to some different masail. So remember that anything which forms a layer over your skin, which prevents water from actually touching the skin, you have to remove that object first and then wash your hand. So if let's say someone is wearing synthetic nails, those plastic nails that some girls wear. So obviously if it's blocking the water from actually touching your actual nails, you're going to have to remove them before you do. The same goes for like nail polish. It forms a thick layer over your skin, which you have to remove before you make wudu. Or if you were making bread and dough accumulated beneath your fingernails, or the dough actually stuck to some part of your hands or your arm, you're going to have to remove it before you wash your hand because it forms a thick layer which you can't remove, which you have to remove before water flows over it. But for example, if you apply lotion, it doesn't form a thick layer such as that. So flowing water over it will satisfy the requirements of the wudu. Also, makeup, for example, using a base or an eyeliner, they don't form thick layers, so you can actually wash over them if they're waterproof, or you wouldn't do that. And similarly, for example, the same goes for lipstick. Like if it's a lip gloss kind, really light material, you can wash over it. But if it's something that actually forms a thick layer, then you're going to have to remove it before you wash your face. I'm not an expert at these things. You probably know better what forms a layer and what doesn't. So just remember, whatever does, you have to remove it before you do wuzu. And whatever doesn't, you can wash over it, not a problem. The same is applied to the hair as well. You have to wipe over the hair with a wet hand. So if, for example, you applied something blocking the hair, the entire head of area of the head, you're going to have to remove it first. For example, when you apply dye to your hair, when you first apply, there's a thick layer of it, which prevents water from actually touching the hair. You can't make wuzu over that. But once you've removed that thick layer of dye and your hair has changed color, in that case, you can wash over it because when your hair has changed color, there's no longer that thick layer over it. It's become part of your hair, so you can wash it. That's not a problem. Oil doesn't prevent water from going over your hair, so that's basically permissible. Not a problem in that. But if it's gel, for example, if it's really thick, it might prevent water from touching your hair. But just make sure that when washing your hands and your feet and face, and when wiping over your head, make sure that it doesn't have such a thick layer which will prevent wuzu from being complete or the obligation of wuzu from being met. Now, these were the farais or the obligations of wuzu. And now we come to the sunan of wuzu. سنن الطهارة غسل اليدين ثلاثا قبل إدخالهما الإناء. And number one, that is to wash both your hands 3 times before entering them into a pot of water. Obviously, these books were written at a time when we didn't have a tap system. So they'd actually take water from a dish and then pour it on their hands and their other body parts. So it's very much possible that, especially when a person wakes up from sleeping, that there might be some najasa impurity on their hands, and if they enter the entire thing into the main body of water, it would get impure and it won't be any possible to use it for purification. And so that's why the Prophet Islam first mentioned that wash your hands before you actually enter into the main body of water. So he mentions washing both hands 3 times when a person performs wuzu after they wake up. But after waking up is not a necessary condition. Even if you were still awake and you're performing wuzu, washing your hands 3 times up to your wrists is a sunnah in itself. So if you only wash it up to your elbow before washing it up to your wrist first, it's okay. Your furs is still complete, but you miss out on a sunnah. وَتَسْمِيَةُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى فِي ابْتِدَاءِ الْوُضُوء. Mentioning the name of Allah at the commencement of wuzu is also a sunnah. You can just say Bismillah or Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. That too suffices. But it's mentioned in the hadith that the person who says this tasmiyah, Bismillah al-Azim walhamdulillah ala deen al-Islam. Bismillah al-Azim walhamdulillah ala deen al-Islam. The angels record in his book good deeds as long as he remains in a state of wuzu. So whenever you say this dua or this tasmiyah before you make your wuzu, as long as you remain in that state, the angels will keep recording good deeds in your books. And also the Prophet Islam, he mentioned, La wuzu'a liman lam yusammi ismallahi ta'ala. that the one who doesn't mention the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in their wuzu has an imperfect wuzu. Not in the sense that it's incomplete and you can't perform your salah with it, but in the sense that the ajr a person would have got if they made the dua is lost to them. Was siwak. The third sunnah is siwak, using a tree wig. Remember, there are two sunnah involved over here. One is the sunnatul istiwak, and the other is the sunnatul siwak. Sunnatul istiwak or istiwak is basically cleaning the mouth. So that's a separate sunnah altogether, which can be fulfilled if you use a brush, if you use mouthwash, toothpaste, etc. You get the ajr of that sunnah, but there's another sunnah of actually using a wooden stick to clean your mouth. That in itself is another sunnah altogether. So if possible, a person, I mean, obviously, start of the day and when you're going to sleep, you wash it, you wash your teeth as you normally do, using a brush and paste. But during the day, whenever you do wuzu, if possible, make a habit of using a tree wig to actually clean your teeth, so you can get the ajr of both the sunnah. There's no specific method on how to clean your teeth, whether it's up and down, left, right. There's no specific size to the twig, how long it should be, how thick it should be, from what tree it should be. None of these things are mentioned in the Sunnah. It's just that it should be a piece of tree. And there are like many hadith which emphasize the importance of the Sunnah as-siwak. The Prophet Islam, he mentions, لولا أن أشق على أمتي لأمرتم بالسواك إن كل وضوء. If I didn't fear burning my ummah, I would have ordered them to actually use the siwak at each wuzu. Like he was ready to make it farz if it wouldn't turn into a burden for the ummah. He also mentioned the three things are sunnah for you, but farz for me. Uh, Salatul Layl, siwak, and witr. That witr, tahajjud, and the use of siwak, miswak. These things are sunnah for my ummah, but they are farz for me, the Prophet ﷺ. And also he mentioned, as-siwaku matharatun lil-fam wa marzatun lir-rabb, that the siwak, the using of this wooden stick and cleaning the mouth, matharatun lil-fam, it cleans the mouth, wa marzatun lir-rabb, and pleases the Lord, pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are some of the hadith which mention the importance of siwak. And the ulama have actually mentioned 70 benefits of using the siwak. And I guess the most important of it is that a person who has the habit of using the siwak remembers the shahadatain at the time of their death. Imagine remembering the shahadatain when you're about to go into the next world. And remember the hadith in which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, Man kana akhiru kalimatihi la ilaha illallah dakhala al-jannah, that whoever's last words are la ilaha illallah, they will enter Jannah, no questions asked. So that's a really big deal. So we should have a habit of actually using this a lot. Right, so I mentioned two sunnah involved here, one cleaning the mouth, the other using a wooden stick. Wal mazmazatu, the fourth is mazmaza, that's rinsing your mouth. Wal istinshaq, and rinsing your nose. Basically, placing some water in your mouth and your nose suffices the farz for the sunnah for the mazmaza as the and the istinshaq. But mubalagha, uh, excessively washing them, is mustahab, or you can say it's an other sunnah altogether. And the had or the limit of excessive in mazmada, in rinsing your mouth, is gargling. So take it to the point that you actually gargle the water when doing mazmada. And in istinshaq, you should pull the water till the hard part of your nose when actually it starts to burn when water reaches there. But to remember, this mubalagha should only be done if you're not fasting. If you're fasting, then avoid doing mubalagha or excessive rinsing of the mouth and the nose because there's this potential danger of water actually passing your throat, which is going to nullify the fast. So in normal circumstances, do excessively, but when you're fasting, avoid doing that. وَمَسْحُ الْأُذُنَيْنِ wiping both ears, that's also sunnah. And wiping your ears comes right after you wipe your head. So you don't have to take new water for that. You can use the same hands by which you wipe your head in the wuzu. And the method of that is you use your index fingers to wipe the inside of your ear, and you use your thumbs to wipe the outside of your ear. وتخليل اللحية والأصابع. تخليل اللحية, that's sunnah number 7, which is to comb your beard, if you have one, with wet fingers. And you have to just comb the part which is on the chin, the one that actually falls down. That's not necessary for a person to actually comb over. If they do, that's good. The combing of the fingers, basically interlocking the fingers and making sure that water reaches the area between both fingers, both in hands and the feet, especially in the feet, because sometimes when you wash over, the cartilage or the area between two fingers, it might remain dry. So make sure that you, in your hands, interlock both hands together. And in washing your feet using the left pinky, make sure that you pass it over in between your toes, just to make sure that the fuzz is actually complete and water reaches your entire hand and your entire feet. And this is very important to note because some people, when they hurriedly make wuzu, parts of their feet and parts of their hands may be left dry, especially these parts between fingers and toes, because it's especially in toes because it's relatively difficult to get water up there. وتكرار الغسل إلى الثلاث, and repeating the washing 3 times. So those body parts that are washed, your face, your hands, and your feet, washing them 3 times is a sunnah. The body part that is wiped, which is your head, uh, wiping it 3 times is not sunnah. Just once is both farz and sunnah. So the Prophet Islam, he says that man tawazza marra marra, that whoever makes wuzu once, that suffices him. وَمَنْ تَوَضَّأَ مَرَّتَيْنِ مَرَّتَيْنِ, and whoever does it 2 times, I mean washes 2 times, he gets twice the reward. وَمَنْ تَوَضَّأَ ثَلَاثًا ثَلَاثًا, and whoever washes 3 times, فَهَذَا وُضُوئِي وَوُضُوءُ أَنْبِيَاءَ قَبْلِي, that this is my wuzu and the wudu of the prophets before me. فَمَنْ زَادَ وَتَعَدَّى فَقَدْ ظَلَمَ وَمَنْ زَادَ وَقَدْ تَعَدَّى وَظَلَمَ, that whoever exceeds or decreases from this amount, by exceed we mean he makes israf, wastes water, and by decrease meaning he believes that less than 3 is sunnah, then that person has transgressed the limits. So if you've done 3 times, you should do it 3 times. That's sunnah. But if you're unsure whether or not you've actually completely covered your entire hand and your feet, your face when washing, you can do it the 4th time as well. Unless you have this habit of doubting, you have this waswasa, problem of waswasa. In that case, you just stop at 3. And no matter what waswasa the shaitan is putting in your hearts, just ignore it. But if you don't have the disease of the waswasa, then go ahead and do it the 4th or even the 5th time if you think that you might have left something dry. So these were the sunan of the wudu. Now let's talk about the mustahab of the wudu. ويستحب للمتوضي أن ينوي الطهارة ويستوعب رأسه بالمس ويرتب الوضوء فيما بدا الله بذكره وبنات المس رقبة. So the things that are mustahab or recommended in wuzu. So the first thing is that the person intends purification. So intending purification is mustahab. Some say it's sunnah, which means that if you don't intend, for example, it started raining and all those requirements of wuzu are met, your hands get drenched, your feet are all washed, you get all wet, your face is all wet, your head's covered, you're now in a state of wuzu. You won't get the ajr of making the wuzu, but you're in a state of wuzu. Similarly, if you go swimming or someone literally pushes you in the pool, your wuzu is now complete, but you don't get the ajr for it. So making an intention of wuzu gets you the ajr for it. And you can make as many intentions as what and increase the level of the ajr you get. For example, so when making wuzu, you can intend that I'm making wuzu for, let's say it's time for Zohar, for the prayer of Zohar. That's one ajr. I'm making wuzu so I can recite the Quran with it. That's another ajr. I'm making wuzu so that I can fulfill the sunnah of the Prophet Islam for staying in the state of wuzu. Like that's another intention. You get a third ajr for this intention as well. You can make the intention of maybe that in order to touch the Quran, in order to enter the mosque, right? So as many intentions as you make, the more ajr that you get on performing just one single action. So like that's the beauty of a person's intention and their motivation that they can actually transform one act of ibadah into like multiple. So you can get multitudes of ajr on doing only just one thing. So a person should definitely make the intention when making tahara that I'm washing my hands, not for the sake of just cleaning them, but for wuzu as well. So that's one mustahab, niyat al-tahara. And remember that a niya intention, that's fi'lul qalb, la fi'lul lisan. This is something that happens with your heart. It doesn't have anything to do with your tongue. So you don't have to say it out loud that I'm doing wuzu. That you have this intention in your heart, that suffices. If you do say it, just in order to be more mindful, it's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not a necessary part of the intention. Always remember that. Not just over here, wherever we talk about intentions, there's no need of actually saying it out loud. It should be in your hand. Uh, it should be in your heart. وَيَسْتَوْعِبُ رَأْسَهُ بِالْمَسِّ. And when actually making mas of the head, wiping the head, a person should cover their entire head. Like we mentioned, رُبْعُ ras, uh, 1/4 of the head, or we mentioned three fingers, your index, middle, and ring finger. That much area is necessary. It's an obligation you cover it. But if you wipe over your entire head, that's also a sunnah. And the way the Prophet Islam he used to do that, he used to place his three fingers, the first three fingers. Remember, you're using your, actually, it's the last three fingers. Remember when we talked about wiping the ear, we said that you wipe your inner part of the ear with your index finger and the outer part with the thumb. So taking both hands, separate the index finger and the thumb. That remains, leaves you with the last three fingers. Place them on the top of your forehead. Start from there and go backwards until you come to your neck. Do not include the neck. So wipe it from the start of your forehead, go back till the just above the neck where the head ends. And now the sides of your head above the ear, they have been left. Then using your palms, you wipe over the side of your head, the area above the ear, and then take it back to the front of your head once again. In this way, you can cover the entire head, including the ears, without actually repeating the process of mas. So that's one way. Some ulama have mentioned, like Imam Ghazali, that a person should make uh, mas, but obviously there's no hard fast rule to do that. Now, although he's mentioned, again, he mentions intention in mustahab, although this is a sunnah. He mentions wiping the entire head as a mustahab, but this too is sunnah, and sunnah muakkada to be more precise. Then he mentions وَيُرَتِّبُ الْوُضُوء فَيَتَّبِعُ بِمَا بَدَأَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى بِذِكْرِهِ. Then he performs wuzu in order and commences with what Allah mentions first. Remember the ayah in the very beginning of the chapter? The order mentioned there should be the order in which a person does their wuzu. First, you wash your face, then your hands up to your elbows, then do the mas of the ras, the head, and then actually wash your feet. So, following this order, uh, again, this is also a sunnah, although he's mentioned it in mustahabbat. So basically, we can say that Imam Quduri over here, when he says mustahab, he's not meaning the literal term mustahab. So this includes the sunan as well, right? And this is also sunnah muakkada, which means it's an emphasized sunnah, and a person should not be leaving it without any valid cause. Wabil mayamini, and to commence with the right limb. So when washing your hands, wash the right first. When washing your feet, wash the right feet first. And mayamin is not just a sunnah in wuzu. It was like a general sunnah, general aada, habit of the Prophet of Islam. Whenever wearing slippers, he'd first place his right feet in it, then the left feet. Whenever wearing clothes, right, he'd first enter his hand into the right sleeve and then the left. So was like a habit of the Prophet of Islam. This is not an ibadah in itself. Remember the distinction we made in the first lecture between Sunan al-Aada and Sunan al-Ibadah. So al-Mayamin, commencing from the right side, is the Aada or the habit of the Prophet of Islam. If you intend Sunnah, hopefully you get ajr, but it's not something that you've been asked to do. What tawali? And also doing the act of wuzu in succession. So you shouldn't have long pauses between each part of the wuzu. You should do in such a manner that at the end of the wudu, your body should still be wet. I mean, your hands, your feet should still be wet. Now, obviously, if it's really hot outside, it dries up really fast. Or maybe it's actually winter, it's really cold, and after you wash each body part, you wipe it off with a towel. All these things, it's okay. There's no problem in that. But like in order to complete a mustahab, something that is good is to do it in succession. And the last mustahab is mashur raqaba. So mashur ras, wiping the head was first necessary, but mashur raqaba, wiping the neck, that is mustahab. And wiping the throat is bid'ah. So you have to avoid it at all cost. Some people go down and wipe their throats. You should not do that because that's an innovation. That's a bid'ah. وَكُلُّ بِدْعَةٍ زَلَالَةٍ وَكُلُّ زَلَالَةٍ فِي النَّارِ. That any innovation in the deen is going astray from the right path, and going astray from the right path is the same as entering hellfire. And so you can wipe your neck, it's a mustahab, but avoid wiping your throat because that is al-bidah. And so this we come to the end of on how you should be doing your wuzu, the farz, the sunan, and the mustahabbat. Now, if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to take them.